Welcome to the Awakened Collective, where we explore the topics of love, spiritual consciousness, and our divine purpose on this planet. Join us as we uncover the truth that our thoughts shape our reality. Welcome to the Awakened Collective. I'm Rick Gregory, and it is a pleasure to be with you today. As I always want to remind everyone that we are the divine extensions of our Creator's love on this planet. We have never, ever been separated from our Creator, and we have never been separated from one another. Just as a Picasso painting, the idea of Picasso could never be separated from the person who had the idea. We are the idea of God, by whatever name you choose to call God, and we can never be separated from that source. We are one. I have a very special guest with me this morning. This gentleman and I have crossed paths in the rooms of recovery, although we don't know each other real well. I just remember that years ago, in a meeting that we were at, I went up to him after the meeting to comment on his amazing voice, his speaking voice. But that was the extent of our exchange. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were at a meeting together, and a friend of mine leaned over and said, a dear friend of mine leaned over and said, have you ever read his book? And I didn't know that this gentleman had a book. And she proceeded to tell me that it was a book that she could not put down. And she, knowing my podcast, she said, you really need to ask him to be on your podcast. So I did at that meeting, and he agreed to be here with me today. I took that suggestion. My life is about taking suggestions now. And I met with him last Tuesday to pick up a copy of his book, and I finished reading it this week. And although these days are primarily, for me anyway, I read a lot of spiritual teacher writings and things like that. And honestly, I can't tell you the last time that I read an autobiography, but this autobiography was a spiritual experience for me, and is a profound message of hope for the hopeless, which is what we've named this episode 38 of the Awakened Collective podcast. So I want to welcome my friend, Karl Wansley. Welcome to the Awakened Collective, Karl.
Thank you, Rick.
Hear that voice? Thank you, Karl, for the gift you are to the world and the gift of your writing to the world. So I know that we've got a lot to cover, and we have about an hour. This book is called Journey into Manhood. And prior to us going live, I had asked Karl how he wanted to proceed with this. And originally I was going to ask him just to share his story, but I know that we'd be here for about a week. So I'm going to go over some portions of the book that really stood out to me and just ask you to share your experience in those particular circumstances. I've got some things here that I just want to read right out of the book because they were a little long for me to type them up, but well, getting started, as a child, 3 months into the first grade, I also experienced a lot of bullying as a child. And you talk about a story with a boy named Tony. And I was wondering if you could just tell us that story.
Tony was a bully. He was older than most of the other children in school. And we didn't have the term bullying then. We just knew he was he was a mean kid. But Tony would take our lunch money and whatever he thought he wanted. You know, we'd have to get the teacher to get it back. But this particular day, it was, I can remember it was really cold. And the Rifleman was my favorite show. And I had one of those little hats that used to wear to flop down on your ears. And Tony came around and he saw the hat, and I saw him coming towards me. But I had a friend, Gilbert. Gilbert and I had made a plan that if he ever bothered one of us, we were going to team up on him.
Yeah.
Now, by me being small, I was going to get his legs. Gilbert was going to get him up high. And hopefully by the time we get him on the ground, the teachers would have shown up. But this particular morning, one teacher's Gilbert wasn't there. And Tony came. He saw my hat. He snatched the hat off. And it was buttoned up under the bottom. And so he struggled with it a little bit, and I got a couple of licks in, but they were ineffectual. But I felt really good afterwards because I had defended myself. But Tony got the hat. We went to the office, and I eventually got my hat back. But that was, I think, my excuse me, my first experience that this isn't right. Life isn't fair. This
Mm,
shouldn't happen. I mean, what did I do?
right.
And that was the beginning of, I guess, the life lesson about life.
And what I noticed in that story is you had shared in the book about it was your mom that obviously got you this coat and this hat,
Mhm.
and going home to her and explaining what happened and not understanding, and what was her response to you?
Her response was that some children, unfortunately, were not able to get warm clothes, good clothes, and the picture that she painted of poverty, because I didn't experience it. At that time in my life, my parents were still married. I had it was a complete home. I had brothers and sisters. I had never known want. I mean, if I needed something, it was always there. But when she explained that some kids were hungry, some didn't have the proper clothes, I mean, it broke my heart because at that time I already knew I was going to grow up to be a preacher. But the next day, I can remember going back to school and offering Tony my hat. And the reason I offered it is because, I mean, I cried a little bit last night when my mom told me about it because I had all of my friends in the neighborhood. I never noticed that they were wanting for anything or lacking for anything. So I tried to give Tony the hat the next morning, but he wouldn't take it. And I never did understand why. I'm like, "Are you cold? You can get a hat." I go home, my mom would give me another hat. It seemed
Mm,
like it was a perfect plan for me. But I was young, sixth
yeah.
grade or something, so I had to grow into some things.
But what spoke to me is your heart, that you heard what your mom said, you had a change of heart. You mentioned in the book how, you had these thoughts of other kids when you see them with dirty clothes and all of that other stuff, and that change of heart to have you go in and give him the hat. Maybe he thought that if he had the hat, you might turn around and go tell him he took it again. I don't know.
Okay, right.
But yeah, I really love that. And it brought back to mind, a bullying incident with me when a kid, lunch money, again, kid stealing my lunch money. His name was Joseph. And have me up with my shirt collar.
Mhm.
And he was bigger than me. He picked me up by my neck and had me against the wall. I didn't go home and tell my mother what was going on. I lied and told when my mom found out that I was not eating because my lunch money was being taken. I told her that my teacher made us give our lunch money to the kids that didn't have any, and so I
Mhm.
got called into into the teacher. My mother took me to the school to meet with this teacher to find out why she was making me give my. It was not a comfortable position, but
Right.
it sounds like you had a really wonderful relationship with your mom.
I
Um,
did.
and you mentioned being brought up to believe that there was a generous God who watched over the earth and rewarded good and punished evil. And I was raised with that same understanding, and I don't see it that way today. And I'm wondering how you see it today.
I believe that God is all of those things. He's loving, he's kind, generous, forgiving. But there's also things that happen in the world. I remember, what was the name of the book? Lord? Why do good things happen to bad people? Things are going to happen in life because we are human and we're experiencing this human existence right now.
Mm-hmm.
So things are going to happen. And although we don't understand, and this is how I feel today, although I don't understand the wars, the rumors of wars, the violence amongst kids, and I don't understand it, but I have to accept the fact that the creator of all has a divine plan that my little brain cannot understand.
Mm.
So I accept he's doing what needs to be done. He, she, uh, the power that is doing what needs to be done for us humans here on earth.
And the way I've evolved to see it today too is that, we come here as, and I could read this in your book, we come here as children and we are sponges for the information we are given by everyone around us. And a lot of times those people are broken.
Hmm.
And then we gather these beliefs that are not our own beliefs, which you mentioned in your book. And, for me, looking out at the world, I see people then once we get here and we're wide open to all this stuff, but we fall asleep to what we actually came from, that we came from love, and we fall asleep to that and collect all this information in our thinking, just like we know in the programs of recovery that it's a thinking disease. There's a lot of people out there that don't know what they are. And I read a book one time that said people are either extending love or they're looking for love. And these people out there that are don't know that they're loved and are acting out of that produce consequences, not only for themselves, but for the world around them. And that's just the way I see. I don't see that God is doing evil
No,
things. And, you hear a lot of people, why isn't God fixing this? Well, I truly believe that the kingdom of God is in us and that we're waiting for God to do something. Perhaps God is waiting for
us
us
to
to
do
do
something.
something. But talk about, which was brought tears to my eyes. Talk about your mom and what happened with your mom.
My mother, excuse me, my mother was, and it might just be because I'm her son, but she was the best mother in the world, loving, compassionate, kind, and she instilled those things in me. I think that my mother knew that I was going to be the last kid she was ever going to have, so she showered all of her love and affection on me. To say that I was spoiled would be an understatement, and she would always read to me from the Bible.
Mhm.
She made sure I go to church. We went to Sunday school, BTU in the evening, and this belief in this all powerful God was her rock, and she made it mine because Mom believed it. Then I believed it, and I could see what a beautiful person she was. But remember, I'm a baby looking at Mom,
Mhm.
but I could see what a wonderful person she was, and so I incorporated all of those characteristics into me that I could as a child because I liked. I mean, I wasn't a bad guy. I believed in right and wrong, doing what's right, good and evil, staying away from the evil. And this is the way I thought life was. This is the way I thought all human beings were on the planet. And I can remember my father was an alcoholic, although that wasn't a term we used at the time in the African American community. I don't think we even knew it, but he was an alcoholic. And eventually, his drinking led to a divorce. So my parents got divorced. And my mother told me one day she was going to have to go to the hospital. She had to have a minor operation, is what I was told. But the operation turned out to be that she had a cancer on the brain, and they had to try to operate. But unfortunately, it was, I guess the cancer had spread too much by the time they found it. And I went to the hospital. Last time I saw my mom, I went to the hospital one Friday. And she said, "Be a good boy. I want you to be a good boy." And I said, "Of course I will, Mom. And I'm just waiting for her to come home. And I think it was 2 days later, my brothers came. No, it was Friday when my brothers came to go to take us to the hospital where we used to go see her. And this particular Friday, they said, "Well, look, it's kind of late, so we're not going to be able to let you go. They won't let you in, this time of night. But we'll go and we'll come back." In about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it seemed too short of a time for them to have visited with Mom, I thought. They came back, and I noticed one of our friends of the family, she was in the carpet. I noticed she was crying. My sister was crying.
Mm.
Rick, when I tell you, I knew then when they pulled up and I saw my sister crying, but my brain would not accept it.
Sure.
No, this can't be what I'm thinking it is. And my next to oldest brother, Sam, who was my favorite brother. People say they don't have favorites, but I
Mhm.
did. Sam was my favorite. And he took us in the back room, my brother right above me. I was 11 at the time, so Benny would have had to be 13 maybe. And he set us back in the room and he told us, "Hey, man, Mom was a good person and, she loved us, but Mom died tonight." And I think it was at that point where Karl shut down. I can't comprehend this. This doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
Uh, you've got the best person in the world, goes to church, prays, does everything, and you killed her, which was my thinking.
Sure.
Uh, and everybody was crying, and I can remember clearly, I didn't shed one tear. I mean, there was something that I think it just died in me when Sam told me, "Hey, mom died." I think it was at that point that spiritually, I was very close to complete annihilation
Mhm.
because I don't want to hear anything about God. I don't want to hear anything about church, and it was just a situation that I had to deal with on my own because I'm dealing with these theological motifs of life and death, good and evil, right and wrong, and no one to talk to about.
Yeah.
So
I don't
I dealt with the best that I could, which eventually was very messed up.
and that was, I mean, 11 years old.
Yes,
That is huge. And then the person that you were able to talk to is no longer there.
yes,
That is really difficult. And I think your parents were divorced at that time?
yes.
And so then you and your brother Benny
Hmm.
had to go live with your dad
Yeah,
after your mom's passing. Um, and just share a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
living with an alcoholic father, and by that time I mean, it was more than chronic. He was jail's next seventh stage. He only cared about drinking. As an alcoholic myself, I know what that's like. I didn't understand it then, but Dad was only interested in drinking. So bills went unpaid. There was no food. Lights went off. Gas went off. I would burn up in the summertime, freeze to death in the wintertime. And it got to the point where I was ashamed and afraid to even come outside. I hated that I had to go to school because that made me have to come outside. My clothes were dirty most of the time, and I was obviously malnourished. And life just, it had gone from sugar to the other stuff
Mm,
almost overnight for me. Now, Dad, I think, didn't want us. I mean, he may have wanted us, but the disease, the alcoholism, he wasn't in shape to take care of children. But it was the right thing to do. My mom had died. Now, Eddie, you got to get these kids. You got to, you know what they tell us about drinking.
sure.
You got to stand up, be a man. Now
Yeah.
it's time for you to exert your willpower and do what's supposed
Do
to be
what's
done.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, but the disease wouldn't let him do that,
Mm,
and it just went downhill
yeah.
once mom died.
You shared that, because you were so hungry, you'd steal food,
Yes,
finding food in the garbage.
yes,
I mean, as a kid, um, and that was before you even were, and then you were entering junior high school in that state of mind, state of physical condition. Um, and you said, with hatred toward your father, rivaled by the anger you felt toward God, turning to the Bible not for confirmation of your beliefs, but for reasons not to believe, trying to end the war that was raging in your mind, but finding that turning your back on all that you had been raised to believe was not an easy task.
no, it was. I mean, when you grow up a certain way, believing a certain thing, we have these life lessons that we have, and all of my life lessons were positive. But after mom died, everything was up for grabs. I don't
Mm,
know what's real now. I don't know what's right now. I don't know if God even exists now. I'm living with this man who all he wants to do is drink, uh, come home. He's supposed to be taking care of his children. I knew that much. And he would come home. Uh, he was a violent drunk, so that was one of the reasons they got divorced. And he would come home, and just because I was there, my brother was there, we'd get a beating
mm,
just because we were there. And in all of this, I'm saying, okay, how can there be a God? Where is he? There were things that, of course, looking back, I could have done because, believe it or not, my grandmother stayed right next door to me.
wow.
But my pride,
Mhm.
uh, youthful, ignorant pride, wouldn't let me go next door and say, "Mama, I'm hungry." Baby, you want something to eat? No, ma'am, I'm good. And my stomach was thinking my throat had been cut. But that pride and that shame of saying, "Well, my dad's not doing what he's supposed to do." For some reason, I just couldn't
Mm,
do it.
yeah. It's like we want to give someone else the poison that we end up drinking, kind
Yeah.
of like that thing. Um, and then your brother Benny went off to the army,
Yes.
and you were now alone in this apartment, right?
Yes.
And your dad was really not living there anymore.
No, Dad had a girlfriend living across town, and that's where he stayed. Uh, he would come home once a month to get the Social Security check. And once a month, he would give me $20. He would give Ben the $20, and I wouldn't see him again for a month. If he came anytime during the month, uh, after the first or the third, I would expect to get a beating. And it
Mm,
got to the point where when I would see his car pull up, I would run out the back door.
mm. And now getting to where all that led for you. So you found yourself on death row at the age of freaking 16.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Desperation, youthful desperation. I wanted to get away from my father. I can remember one day, now around 14, 15 years old, I stopped letting him just beat me. I began to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
I was way, 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 way too small to win. But just the idea of trying, did something for me. So eventually got to the point where I said, man, I've got to leave. The catalyst, well, I can't say it was really the catalyst, but it may have been, but because a lot of things were going on. But I can remember one morning, my father came home, and early, early in the morning, I heard the car pull up. I get out of bed, and at that time, I had a gun. I had, I used to break in cars if I had to, just to try to get the 8 tracks were big, booming back in the early 70s. If you steal one, you could get $10. So I had broken in this car. Well, it was already open. I just opened the door. I couldn't get the 8 track, but the glove box was open, and there was a gun in it. So I got the gun. So when Dad came in that morning, went straight to the back room, and I'm sitting on the side of the bed. And he came back to the front room. He knew I was drinking, using, marijuana. And he came back in the front room, and he said, boy, you got something to drink? I need something to get the shakes off. And I had a half a pint of Old Charter. I reached under the mattress, gave it to him. And I saw my father drink almost all of that Old Charter. And as he was drinking, the thought went through my mind, man, if I don't get away from him, I'm going to grow up to be just like him.
Mm.
This is my dad. He's supposed to be my role model. He's supposed to be guiding me, teaching me. And instead, he's asking me for whiskey at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. I said, if I don't get away from him, I'm going to be just like him. I knew that there were some guys in the neighborhood who always kept money. I didn't know what they did. I thought they had a job. But they always seemed to keep money. And so one day I asked them, I said, hey, man, what do you all do, to keep this money? Because in my 16-year-old brain, if I get money, I can get away from Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Then think about it. You're 16. Nobody's going to rent you an apartment. You're not going to be able to buy a car. You're not going to be able to get any utilities on it. The only thing I had in my mind was if I could get this money, I can get away from Dad. And they told me they robbed people. Now, I had never, the thought of anything like that never crossed my mind. But at this point in my life, man, I need to, well, obviously y'all get away with it because you keep, police hadn't arrested you yet. So I want to go with you the next time you go. And to make a very long, sad story short, the next morning, we went to rob this community grocery store in our neighborhood. And because I had a gun, they told me when we got to the store, now I'm 16 years old. I didn't weigh 100 pounds. And you're telling me to go in the store and rob somebody. But one guy, Sea Creature, who had come into town, he was a neighborhood guy, but he had kind of adopted me. And he was also with them. And I was afraid. Sea Creature did not say a word. He did not say one word, my own mind. I said, man, if I don't do this, because I'm ready to run, I'm ready to go home. I don't want to go in the store and rob anybody. I said, but if I do this, if I don't do this, rather, what if Sea Creature stopped taking care of me? Because, I used to get slapped around just for the fun of it by the other kids, bigger kids, bullies in the neighborhood, but we didn't know they were bullies. And I said, if I don't do this, what if he turns me loose? What if he stops protecting me? Mm-hmm. So my fear, on the one hand, of going in here robbing these people was overshadowed by my fear of not having, well, we call him Secret Calvin, of not having Calvin there to protect me. So I went in the store. And when I got in the store, now, again, it's a neighborhood grocery store. I had been in this store on numerous occasions. The people knew me, hundreds. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been in the store in 4 years, but they knew me on sight by name. So imagine a
Mm.
little 16-year-old kid that you know his parents and all, comes in the store and say, "Rick, give me your money." Man, if you don't give me that gun, well, the owner of the store, the male, Papa Seals, he got up, started walking towards me. Now, in my mind, because I pulled the gun when I said stick 'em up, in my mind, you're supposed to come to the cash register, give me the money, and I run. But when he got up and started coming towards me, all of those things that my mother had taught me that had been overshadowed over the years through alcohol, through weed, through abuse and neglect, all of those things faded away. And I heard clearly my mom was telling me, baby, you know this wrong. This is not godly. This is not what God would want you to do. And I'm trying to battle in these little few seconds that I have. What do? I know God. I remember God now. And I remember what my mother taught me now. But this man is still walking towards me now. And I panicked. And when I panicked, I started shooting. And when I got through shooting, I had killed the proprietors of the store. They were an elderly African American couple. And I would have been standing there in the store when the police came, had not Calvin come in and pulled me out. And I can remember running out the store for the first time in years. Tears were rolling down my face. I mean, just a torrent. And I was saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That evening, I mean, it was all over the news. Teenagers didn't do those kind of things in 1974. It was all over the news. It was the talk of the town. Nobody wanted to talk about anything else. And we were at one of our friends' house, and some other people would come in, and they would talk about it. About, man, if I catch whoever did that, boy, what I'm going to do to them son guns if I can catch them, you know. And I'm sitting there saying, I've messed my life up. I don't know what to do now. I mean, I was just in shock. And that evening, hunger eventually got us out of the house. And the police caught us at a fast food restaurant. And when he snatched the door open on my side, I knew then I was going to prison. Don't you move, had a gun on by my head. And I just knew. I mean, for the first time that day, I calmed all the way down. There was no longer any fear, any anxiety. Hey, I'm getting ready to go to prison. 16 years old. I done messed my life up. I knew that in the back of that car when the officer said, don't move. At 16 years old, 4 months later, I was tried and convicted of capital murder and was sentenced to die in the Mississippi gas chamber at Parchment. And 3 days after that, I was in prison, maximum security.
And you were the youngest there, right?
Yes. And and at that time, according to the reception person, I was the smallest ever because I didn't weigh 100 pounds. And this was after 4 months in the county jail, eating regularly. Had it not been for the crime that I committed, it was the best thing that happened to me. I mean, the lights were always on, the bills were paid, food every day, clean clothes. Man, it was, if I wasn't facing the death penalty, I could be happy here.
Yeah.
But I ended up on death row. And when I got to receiving, the man said, wait a minute, you don't even weigh 100 pounds. He said, I've never checked anybody in that didn't weigh 100 pounds. And he made me pick up books until I tipped the scale at 100 pounds. So if you get my record, it should say I weighed 100 pounds when they processed me.
Oh, my goodness. You mentioned, one of your quotes in the book, or from the book, is, I must find the gateway that led to manhood in this concrete jungle. And if there was a loving and forgiving God, then I would search him out. The dichotomy between my belief and my experience must be reconciled. That's just a powerful statement. And you also mentioned that the person taking your first mugshot was someone you knew.
Yeah, in the county jail, city jail. He was Sam, my brother favorite. He was Sam's best friend. I never knew what Paul did.
Well, you found out
for a living, right?
Man.
And he took the first mugshot, and when he came in and saw me, I mean, he had heard the name already, but it never, ever crossed his mind that I was the Carl Wansley. It had to be another Carl Wansley.
Mm.
And when he walked in and saw me, he said, I mean, he couldn't believe it. No one could believe it. I mean, I nothing about my behavior other than me trying to steal to eat would indicate that I would do something even remotely close
Yeah.
to committing murder.
Yeah. The detail in the book is just profound. I mean, I was just moved from cover to cover. You mentioned, you said, I lay awake. I lay awake after lights out, trying to determine where I had gone wrong. I believed that I was not a bad or evil person. I had never desired notoriety. Now, an unthinking act had focused the attention of an entire city on me. All I had wanted was what every child needs: a stable home, food to eat, clean clothes, parental guidance, and love, all of which I had been denied. When in reading your book, I am just reminded again on my spiritual journey that how my thinking and how I see things have changed, and recognizing that everyone, whether they're 16-year-old on death row or whether they are the freaking president of the United States, are all subject to the conditioning that they were raised in, that forms their thinking, that forms how they see themselves, how they see the world. And that thinking produces emotions, and those emotions produce actions. And just to think of someone your age, I could put myself there. I'm thankful that I never went to jail, but there were times when I should have gone. You mentioned now that I have committed murder, everyone cared all of a sudden. My church minister came to visit me once in the city jail. Where was he? My brothers had been granted emergency leaves from the armed services. I had been in a state of emergency since my mother's death. Why now get an emergency leave? I did not need anyone to care about me now. Just let me die and be done with it. I had not lived in peace, but at least let me die in peace.
That was my belief. I mean, I felt, not only were they going to execute me, but I needed to be executed. I deserved to die. I did not want to live any longer on this planet. Look at what I've done in my life. Look at what I did to those old people. I don't deserve to live. Somebody else could use the oxygen that I'm obviously just wasting on me, being wasted on me. And I really just wanted to die.
Mm.
I didn't want to face anyone. I didn't want to look at somebody and say, hey, I killed some people. I'm a murderer. I didn't want people looking at me saying, oh, that's the murderer. Man, just end it. And now that I'm locked up, you're all here. Where were you just a month ago, a week ago? If someone had come forward, probably, and said, hey, Karl, we're going to at least feed you, if nothing else, that might have made all the difference in the world.
Mm.
And I didn't find out until I got out of prison, because I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt. Nobody knows what's going on. And I had a friend tell me after I got out of prison, Karl, everybody knew what was going on. And I asked her, why didn't you all do something? And that's really basically the question I'm asking now with what's going on with young people in our community now. Why aren't we doing something? I mean, I think my case should have been a wake-up call. What is happening? But we didn't look at it as, I guess we didn't see the whole picture. They looked at it as an individual incident, isolated incident. This is just Karl. But, man, I'm not the only somebody. I wasn't the only somebody suffering like that. And now, 40 years later or so, we see the results of not getting involved, not taking an interest. And now everybody's trying to come up, hey, what do we do? Well, basic necessities first. Let's see, can we work out the basic necessities? I was talking to some prisoners yesterday, I do ministry at the prison. And I asked the group, I was telling them about AA. And I said, listen, a bunch of drunks got together. The dregs of society. Doctors had given up on them. Psychiatrists had given up on them. Parents, everybody had given up on them. And these rejects of society got together and designed a program that has now saved millions of people from alcoholic destruction. So I asked the group yesterday, why don't you all do that? You've got all these kids in here, different organizations. You got them all right here, captive audience. Why don't y'all get together and come up with an idea?
Mm.
How can we solve this problem? I said, let's start out with that violence is not the problem. Violence is an extension of the problem. It's
That's
a
true.
manifestation of the problem.
It's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
so but you've got all of these people here, and you've got the time. Why don't we try to come up with an idea?
Mhm.
Let's see, can we solve this problem?
Awesome. You know, you mentioned, I was just thinking too that we hear the acronym HALT in the rooms of AA, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, as being
hmm
triggers for an alcoholic. You had all of those, every single one. I want to go back a minute because, I like how you do this in the book, but we were in the prison portion of the book, but then you flick back to um, a meeting with your dad when you were 14. Your father had technically moved out of the apartment and he left you alone. And he showed up,
To take me
appeared to be
fishing.
appeared to be sober, wanted to take you to breakfast, and your thoughts were that it was a trick.
Yes, indeed.
Can you tell us about what happened there?
Paranoia. Uh, I use the analogy sometimes that you kick a dog and then you feed the dog. You kick the dog and then you feed the dog. At some point, the dog is going to say, I don't think the food worth it.
Mm,
The price
powerful.
that I have to pay for this food is too much. And I had got to that point with my father. Man, I don't want anything because, you're going to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the relationship. You stay away. You come once a month. You give me $20. That's great. Let's keep that relationship. And he showed up one morning and said, hey, boy, you want to go to breakfast? Yeah, you finna kill me. You trying to take me somewhere and knock me off, right? Because there had been a couple of incidents in the apartment where he had left a skillet on with nothing in it. And, I wake up the house full of smoke. We didn't have smoke detectors in those days. And I said, man, he trying to kill me. So when he offered to take me to breakfast, of course, no, my spider sense is kicking in. Something is wrong with this. We went to breakfast, but hey, a free meal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I won't have to steal today. Maybe I won't have to try to beat the dogs to the garbage can today. So I got a gun, so I'm ready to go. And we went to breakfast, and I couldn't believe it. I had not seen this father since before he and my mother got divorced. He was fun. He was joking. He was flirting with the waitress, and I'm like, "Ma, this is dad. This don't feel too bad." And then the shocker, when we got through with breakfast, he said, "Hey, you want to go fishing?" Now I love fishing. I would go fishing. I complained about the cold early, right? But I would go fishing in the cold.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been since before mom died. Before dad and mom got divorced. It was the last time I'd gone fishing. And I said, well, yeah, sure, why not? It was the best father-son day that a son could want. Dad paid for everything. We had food, we had drink. The fish didn't do a whole bunch of biting, but that was irrelevant. And sometime during that day in that boat, here I go with my magnifying mind. Everything's changed. Dad's going to come back home. He's going to be the father that I knew as a kid when he and mom were together, and everything's going to be great. I knew I could do better in school. I intentionally made bad grades in school because I didn't want to embarrass my friends who would talk about me and maybe stop messing with me. Uh, I said, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to be the best student. I'm going to be the best son. I mean, things are going to be wonderful. All is forgiven, Dad. Okay. And that evening after we came back from fishing, it was dark. And when we got to the house, I'm thinking Dad getting ready to come in and we're going to continue this wonderful day. And at the back of the car, Dad said, hey, boy, you want these fish? I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean do I want the fish? These are our fish. We're going to eat these fish. Did you hear me, boy? You want these fish? Come on, I got to go home. This
Mm,
is home. This is where your son is. That's when I knew I'm going to kill him. I don't want to go back to. I don't want to go back to what it was. I don't want to go back to yesterday, what it was like yesterday for me. I don't want to go back to the day before yesterday, what it was like for me. I want today to be the rest of my life. And if today can't be the rest of my life, then it's going to end today. I said I should kill him right now because at least if I kill him right now, and I hadn't even shot the pistol, even though I stole it, I hadn't pulled the trigger one time yet. I said, at least my last memory of him would be a good one.
mm,
But of course, I didn't do it. I just turned and left the door open and walked up the street trying to find some alcohol and drugs.
mm.
I was through.
And you say, because of his addiction, my father could not be a father to me. And because of mine, I could not be a son to him. We were caught in a malicious cycle of deferred dreams and unrealistic hopes. Man. So then you go on, it says, oh, you already mentioned this about, feeling like you could have been quite happy in prison because of, you had fresh linens and food. Um, and you think we forget that the basic necessities, like you said, if we don't have those, there's no telling where we'll go. Um, and then to finally have those needs satisfied where you're not having to dig through rubbish for food. Certainly roof over your head and you had people around you.
Yes.
I could see that and actually have another sponsee who shares a similar story who spent 10 years in prison. Questioning the preachers who came to jail, trying to assure you that the places and events that you read about in the Bible were true, and you not being convinced that not only your belief in God having been shattered, but your trust in people. You state that you had been tricked and misled too long to accept another person's belief as your own. That really spoke to me because I didn't start looking at my beliefs that I had hung on to that weren't my beliefs until I was in my late 50s. Um, and there were a lot, and like I said earlier, it's like we grow and we collect this information. And when you've got someone who's a parent or a teacher or someone who's smarter than you, more educated, or, pastors for me as well, you just assume they know. And so I hung on to beliefs that were diametrically opposed to what I knew in my own soul. And just that's what this work in AA, it's the work that I think that we all need to do, is take a look at ourselves and what
Mm.
we believe to be true and be willing to examine it, be willing to let some of that shit go, pardon my
Yeah.
French. You had a cellmate, Howard, who was trying to teach you the ropes. You said, although his conversations were meant to encourage you, they often had the opposite effect, that you had lived with low self-esteem so long that possession of a strong character was foreign to your nature, and you did not believe a transition of that magnitude was possible. Tell us about that relationship and what he was trying to do for you.
It was obvious that I was afraid. All right. I mean,
Of
it's my
course.
first time in jail, and believe it or not, the inmates there, they wanted to encourage me, and this is what Howard was trying to do. And so when he started telling me about what it's like in prison, and certain things happen, so he told me the good and the bad, and of course I focused all on the bad. You mean men rape men? Uh, take their things that the parents sent them or loved ones sent them, and you got to go out in the fields and pick 200 pounds of cotton. That man, I weigh 96 pounds.
Mm.
How am I going to stop any person from doing whatever they want to do to me? No, I don't think I want to go to prison. Again, I think it would be best for me to I need to die anyway. I killed two old people. I don't need to live the upbringing that I had from my mother, the scripture reading, the studying. I don't deserve to live, Rick,
Mm.
right? And I felt that in my soul. So when Howard began to try to explain to me, hey man, things are gonna be, you're gonna be okay in here, man. I don't want to be okay in here,
Mm-hmm.
right? if I can't get out of here, I want to be dead because I've gone through so much hell already. I don't even want to experience any of the things that you say that may go on, even if they don't happen. I don't even want to be around them.
Yeah.
I done took too much. I'm ready to die. I'm 16 years old. I done messed my life up anyway. Um, but
Mm.
eventually, and I tried. I said, okay, I'm through. I'm gonna kill myself. And I tied a belt. I think this might be one of the not my particular incident, but this might be why we inmates no longer allowed to wear belts. But I can remember tying my belt to the bars and string it around my neck. I waited until everybody in the cell was asleep. I thought, because I don't want I don't want to be interrupted. I don't want anybody to stop this.
Mhm.
I'm serious about it. I'm finna go. And I can remember tying the belt and saying one last prayer: "Forgive me, Father, for what I've done." And when I let go of the belt, as soon as I started dangling, I saw everybody in the cell start rising up. Right, they had been watching because they knew
Mm.
Karl ain't just right. And I did pass out though. By the way, I mean, obviously I had tied the belt just right. If they hadn't woke up, and when I came to, they were all around me. Come on, man, don't do this, don't do it. And I knew I would never have the courage to do it again.
Mm.
I said, I'm going to prison. Life is. I thought it was rough. Now it's just, man, I don't even know why God created me.
Yeah. Wow. You say the trial lasted 4 days from jury selection to sentencing, that you had not intended to kill anyone, but poverty, hunger, and the conditions of your young life led to a moment of desperation and panic. But you state that you and God knew the intent of your heart. Only we know ourselves. That's that secret place. No one else in the world knows what I'm thinking about me, about the
Mm.
world. It's what we see. Horrific events and experience in prison throughout the book. The fights, the bloodshed, the fear of rape, the fear of misinterpreting or misjudging the gesture of another. And I remember you and the book, and this really spoke to me too, because I could feel it. I could feel so much of what I read in this book. I'm going to actually read this. It's on page 161. This was your cell, a person across in another cell, I believe, asking you for a light for their cigarette.
Yeah, right next
Yeah.
to me. So,
And you said, yes, you had a match. And this was very early on, I believe. You hesitantly passed, I passed my one box of matches into the outstretched hand, wondering if I would ever see them again. Hand, butt, and matches disappeared into the cell. I waited 3, 4, 5 seconds went by. Was the smoker next door smiling at his cleverness and victory? How long did it take to light a cigarette? Should I say something? Should I ask for my matches back? What if he didn't answer or said no? What then? How long had it been? Had it been? Should I sit down and accept the loss? If I didn't say anything, would that be taken as a sign of weakness? Why were my hands sweating? And then he does pass them back.
yes.
But that all of that questioning, and you're in a place where, if you do something decent for someone, it's going to be viewed a certain way. And if you don't do something, it's going to, and I could just feel the craziness going on in the mind of all of the questions and not knowing which direction you should go. And I think that, even outside of prison, we can experience those kinds of things. Then I wanted to read, because you mentioned, let's see, 192. It was quiet on the row at night, and in that quiet I bowed my knees. Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. Take my life such as it is, and mold me, shape me into what you would have me to be. I lay awake listening to the subdued night voices of the row until sleep came. But for the first time in a long time, I felt that God had heard my prayer. And you mentioned in the book early on feeling like that your words were just falling to the ground when it came to your conversations with the God of your understanding. But in that time, you said, in a couple of other places, where you say that you felt that God heard your prayer. What is it that you felt? Like how was that different from previous times that you called out?
This particular time, we know from from the program that we have to surrender completely, and it's only by surrendering that we gain true strength. And I think in that moment, with everything that had gone on in my life, I decided that because you have to make a decision at some point. Do I believe the big book tells us at some point you have to make a decision. Either God is or He isn't. What was your decision to be? And I think with all that I was going through at that particular time, I had to make a decision. I mean, mom she had instilled God in me, right? And like the book, pump circumstances might have obscured it, but at that particular moment, there was nothing. God, I'm just going to be honest. If you are there, please help me, right? Just help me. I mean, I see where I am. I'm not saying open sales and let me go home, but just help me where I am. And I think it was that complete surrender, that
Mm-hmm.
complete honesty, uh, complete willingness to believe
Yeah.
that God heard. And when I made that prayer, I just it's hard to describe a feeling that you feel all over your body. Your entire body just felt different. My thought at the time was different. Uh, what I had come to believe and think about God due to the circumstance that I had undergone was wiped away, and I went back to the basics. Yes, there is a God. Then what are you going to do? Now all I need is guidance. And that's what I was praying for. And
Yeah.
that's what I felt that night, that the guidance would come, but it wasn't going to come instantly. But I had made the first step by admitting you were there.
Yeah. And it was that humility of heart that I could see. Your father, while visiting, asked if he was the cause of you being in prison.
Yes.
And you thinking at that time that it was your last chance to let him have it.
Yes, indeed.
So could you share that experience or that more portion of time?
Yes, this was right after I got on death row, maybe 2 or 3 months. I don't remember exact date now, but I know I hadn't been on death row long. And my father came to visit by himself. Now, usually, if somebody came to visit my brothers or sister, they would, be more than one. But this particular Sunday, my father came by himself all the way to Parchment. And I knew when he walked in the visiting room, he had something heavy on his mind. And that was his question. Am I the reason you are here? I thought about all the beatings. I thought about the neglect. I thought about in my last year before I got arrested, I had built me a bed under the house. So that when dad came home on those rare occasions, I would go into the house and that's where I would sleep. And I thought about all those things that I had gone through since mom died because of circumstance and him not being he was an alcoholic. I understand now fully. And we did reconcile our situation before he died. Uh, and I said, boy, this is my chance. I ought to just make him feel like he's made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
But because of a, a new understanding, what would have been the purpose? I mean, I could have went back down the tier and said, yeah, I told him I got him. I got him. I let him know how I feel. But what would have been the purpose? And I told him that, and I understood at that time. I made that decision. That was my choice to go to that store. There were a bunch of things I could have done differently. No, it's not your fault. I was old enough to know what I was doing.
You mentioned what purpose could be served by adding an additional burden to such an already tormented spirit. And it just made me think of the Karl that gave his hat, in first grade. You had an opportunity to do something different, but you followed your heart. Your experience of calm, no longer carrying the negative mental baggage. So you had a release at that point in time that you didn't even know you carried.
Right.
Until that moment, that there was some forgiveness going on there, whether it was identified as that or not. In reading from the Bible, you mentioned from the writings of Paul one night, you write, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you've received from God?" And you say, how did I miss this in my first readings of the Bible? The Spirit of God was in me. That which I longed to find, whom I longed to question, was inside of me. And you go on to write, the Spirit of God was attempting to save me from me. That was just really powerful. I always, most of us grew up believing that God was external, up there in the sky.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the experiences that you had on this journey, and I know because you wrote the book, you look back and see all the things that God, the universe, the ground of all being, divine intelligence, was showing you and teaching you. I wanted to read from page, I just have a few more, 254. Let's see. You say, when you establish a relationship with an inmate, you take on his problems as well as your own. Isn't that what being human means? To have compassion for another, to be willing to share their trials and tribulations. Again, just the awareness of things. Yeah, that is what it means.
But it's unfortunate most people don't realize that. I mean, people are suffering because they do it to themselves. They manufacture their own misery.
Mm-hmm.
I still do counseling with young people. And when I tell you that today, that there are children who are hungry, who are being abused, who don't have the basic necessities of life, they're out here. And they're trying their best to do what they can do to maintain their sanity and their wholesomeness if they have it. And it's going on every day. And people next to them, next door, cousins, uncles, grandmothers, they know that this is going on, and they do nothing.
Mm.
And it's just like what was happening with me. The community knew what was going on, and they did nothing.
Yeah.
Then how do you expect the situation to get better?
Right. Absolutely. You also mentioned one of my favorite scriptures. I think it's Psalms 27:3 was, "As a man thinks, so is he." I mean, which is what we're talking about. You mentioned my thoughts over the last 5 years had led to behavior that was detrimental to my well-being. Without awareness, I had become one of those inmates who, by their actions, perpetuated the false conceptions of prison as a violent and dangerous place. I had become one of the few pseudo-sociopaths that made all prisoners look bad. I had become the type of inmates I feared encountering when I was a frightened 16-year-old in the county jail. And again, it's as we think.
So are we.
And then on page 320, you say, my time in lockdown had allowed me to analyze my behavior during and before my incarceration. I had come to realize that my life had been fear-centered. I had, even as a child, lived and behaved according to what I thought was expected of me, or out of fear of what might happen to me. Never had I lived or behaved according to what I believed or wanted. I had always believed in God, always believed that doing good carried its own reward and that one should love thy neighbor as thyself. But I had never been strong enough to carry those beliefs into action. Deep within me, they had lain dormant, deprived of the life-giving force that had once moved upon the waters and transformed nothing into something. But quietly, while on lockdown, I had opened my heart to that spirit, and the waters of my soul had been cleansed. I don't know if you have anything you want to share about that, but that was pretty freaking powerful.
I try to live that way today. And because of the program of recovery, it enhances my ability to live the way I want to live, to be my authentic self. I tell people now, Hey, I try to get right into the solution these days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to use up any brain power wondering, worrying about, and cursing about things that I have absolutely no control over. I'm going to do the things that I can do, the positive things, because that's all I'm interested in. And that's it. And whether you agree with it, the world disagrees with it, hey, but this is how Carl feels. I believe that there's a higher power. And I believe that if you could surrender yourself to that power, regardless of your physical situation, you can live at peace. Because regardless of what goes on in my life, and a lot of things have gone on since I joined this 12-step program that I would not have been able to deal with, I don't think, had I not been a part of this program. What we have to learn to do is live it. I've got to get the courage to say, you know what? Red just not my color. I don't like red. Okay. And regardless of how other people feel about it. And that's with life. I go places, and my wife, she, bless her heart, I still talk to these young men. I have some relatives who are in organizations. And I go around sometime and just try to, put out a good word. And I'll be honest with you, Rick. I met some of these young men, they scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
All right. I try not to let it show because that was me. But see, I know where that's going, my experience, strength, and hope. See, I try to talk to them and let them know, hey, let me tell you where that's leading to.
Yeah.
When Dr. Silkworth talked about we need some form of moral psychology, this is what I try to do with them every day. We have got to learn how to get our moral identity in tune with our character so that it becomes a positive asset instead of something negative. And you're not going to be able to do that if you're afraid to talk to these kids.
Yeah.
And that's what they are. They just kids. Some of them got guns, but they are children. When you go to the detention centers, when you go to the jails, when you go to the prisons, you will see these same ones that you lock your door when you see them out here. Man, it's just a kid. Look how he looks when he clean up there and cut his hair and put on some clean clothes and his pants not sagging. He's just a child. And now we're living in a society where we're afraid of our children.
Mm-hmm.
We got to do somebody has to do something. Somebody has to be willing to take a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see from the book, I've been wanting to die on numerous occasions. And I know that I am going to die. One thing sitting on death row has taught me, I'm going to die. One day I'm going to have made an arrangement to come do a podcast. I'm going to be on my way to meet a sponsee. I'm going to be on the way to meet my sponsor. I'm going to have something planned, and I'm going to die. Well, if I die trying to help my brother, man, my sister, to recover from hopeless states of mind and body, well, okay, I'm going to die someday.
Yeah.
It won't be with a bottle in my hand, God willing. It won't be because I was drunk and ran off the road or killed somebody. I don't think that's going to be it. But if I die trying to help, okay, that's what God knew that was going to happen.
Yep.
That's why he sent me that.
Die while you're fulfilling your purpose.
Somebody has to do
it. I want to talk about Chris because this was really powerful. So this gentleman named Chris, who was raped in prison, and how the code in prison was that you just don't talk about it, you ignore them, you don't console them, you distance yourself from them. But you finding, because he went off after this happened and no one could find where he was, and you went on pursuit to find him. And you said he had crawled through an inside window and gotten into the laundry room. When I opened the door, Chris was sitting on a sack of dirty clothes, crying and calmly cutting his throat with 2 razor blades he had taken out of the throwaway razors inmates used for shaving. I stared in horror at the deep gashes his makeshift suicide tools had made in the sides of his throat. I grabbed his arms to restrain him from doing any more damage to himself. He offered no resistance. He only looked into my eyes and told me, "Karl, you know what happened to me. I'm a man, and I can't live with what happened." My tears mingled with the blood covering my hands from where I was holding Chris. For the first time in my incarceration, I violated the inmate code. According to the code, I should have left Chris where he was, washed my hands, and pretended to know nothing about anything when the officers finally found him. But I knew if I did that, Chris would die. I helped him up and walked him to the desk in the center of the hall, screaming for the officers to call an ambulance. To my credit, the officers did not accuse me of having anything to do with Chris's injury. They only told me to wash up before security arrived to avoid confusion.
That's one of those times where I think things happen in a person's life that changes them irrevocably. And I've been seeing for years what it's like in prison, and this isn't how this isn't how it's brought up. It shouldn't be this way. And not all inmates are violent and dangerous. You know, most inmates I met, all they want one thing: come home. But all it takes is a couple of sprinkling in 3 or 4 sociopaths, guys who have mental issues, because they do send you to prison when you have mental problems when you should be at Whitfield. It will give the impression and the image that all prisoners are like this. But that in that moment, I had a decision to make. What are you going to do? Who are you, Karl? Right? You want to be like them other guys? You know, like I said, the ones that I was afraid of when I first came, because that's what they would do. Or do you have enough humanity still to try to save this man's life? What is your choice going to be? And I made my choice. And like all things in life, you have to be willing to live with the consequences. At that point, the consequences didn't matter. What mattered was seeing if I could save this man's life. That's all that mattered.
And then, I love this part. Then you ask the officers on duty to call all the inmates to the hall. And when everyone was present, what happened?
See how crazy I was. When they took him to the hospital, I called out at the office to get all the inmates in the little joint room where we all would meet. And I explained calmly as I could. Nobody else is going to get raped out here. No one. I don't care who. I don't care what they do. You can beat them up. I don't care about you beating somebody up, stabbing them if they do something. But no other man is going to get raped against his will. Now, if they do it on their own, that's well and good. I said, but if you do decide to rape someone, before you do that, you need to factor in my response. I'm not going to like it at all. And at that time, I had they took my word at it. They knew it would probably be something.
Yeah.
Now, I was not anywhere near the biggest, strongest, craziest, dangerous person at that camp. But that's what I said. And I meant it. Because whatever the consequences are, I'm willing to deal with them. No one should have to come to prison. You already in prison, Rick. You already away from your family and society. You don't have but a few things. And now I got to worry about you raping me? What if I have children? How am I going to go home and look at my son? Be a man, boy. And not let other men rape me. Now, anybody can be raped. Do not get me wrong. You get enough people, they can get you. But what you do about it is going to determine how the inmate's going to think about you. Because there was a guy who got raped one time, and next day he stabbed the crap out the guy and almost killed him. Hey, nobody treated him like he was any less than a man. So you have to be willing to hold up for what you believe. And that's what I try to do every day of my life now. Hold up for what I believe.
Yeah.
Coming to an understanding of who I am and what I believe. That's the journey. That's what takes so long. Experience is the best teacher, but it takes so goddamn long for you to get it. By the time you learn something worth having, you're too old to do anything with it. But in the moment that you have it, just live that moment.
Yeah.
That's all we have.
You represented, or you were a form in that place with the energy of the power of love that also impacts the lives around you, whether you're doing anything or not. But because you took this stand, I just see it as the stand of love. I'm not going to tolerate this, and you had better factor in my response, is what you stated. You began tutoring And I know I'm jumping. There's no way we can cover everything in here, but you began tutoring to help inmates get their GEDs, speaking to tours of people in Project Aware, entering junior college. You became training coordinator for Project Aware and accepted the Distinguished Service Award for Volunteer Community Service from the then governor of Mississippi, Bill Elaine. Graduated cum laude with an Associate of Arts degree in General Education. You went before the parole board twice and were turned down. And folks, you need to read about that in the book too. Just the experience of, in one particular case, not even getting to your chair
Yes.
before you were turned away. Losing the will to move forward, to go forward after those rejections. You continued still with your tours inside the prison, hoping to take a busload at this one. I love this story. A busload of beautiful and intelligent women
Yes, indeed.
showing up to take a tour that you were part of, to show them around. You noticed in this busload of beautiful women, there was also an elderly Caucasian woman who was struggling and could hardly move. And your heart sank, knowing that no one else was going to help this person, and that this was going to be your responsibility to take this elderly woman around and lose your chance at hanging out with the beautiful, intelligent women. I want you to tell the listeners, because this is just one of those life things. You know, you see this woman, you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to have to do this, but of course I'm going to have to do this. And how that story turned around and what that woman did for you.
I've heard the saying over and over, God works in mysterious ways.
Mm.
I was a virgin when I went to prison. And I had never had a girlfriend. And after I had got turned down for parole, I said, okay, well, obviously I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. I mean, once you get an award from the governor of the state, if that's not enough to show that you've been rehabilitated, to let the parole board give you a second chance, there's nothing else I can do. I decided I wanted a girlfriend. I said, if I'm ever going to have a girlfriend, obviously it's going to have to be from behind prison walls, because I never wanted that. I didn't think that was going to make a good relationship. But now that I've been turned down for parole after receiving this award and other awards, I guess I'm going to have to try to get me a girlfriend. And a college, oh man, they were, like I said, they were beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
W.B. Du Bois, talented 10th, I'm ready for you. And when I saw this lady, I knew. But anyway, I went up to her and introduced myself. And I told her, you know, I'm going to be your tour guide, your personal tour guide today. Any questions you have, you just let me know. And we sat on the bus. We started going to the first camp. We, of course, because of her age, we sat first seat on the bus when she got on the prison bus. But they couldn't ride the bus that they came up on through the prison, so they had to get on the school bus. And we got on the first seat. And I can remember when we sat down, I never heard that many girls speaking. It sounded like music to me. The voices were just different. And I'm sitting on the front seat with this old lady, and Basim and Ramon, you know, George, they're in the back of the bus, just, oh man. But I got to do my job. And I started talking with her, and she told me she was a retired professor. And we started talking. By the time we got to our first stop, first camp we went to, I couldn't believe this. Man, I love this lady. Her first question was, what is it like in prison? And I remember telling, and her name was Dr. Clarice Campbell, by the way. And I remember telling her the standard answer. Oh, well, you know, we get up in the morning at 5 o'clock. We have to make our beds up. We go to breakfast. She said, no, son, that's not what I mean. I mean, what is it like in prison? How does it affect you? How does it affect your family? If you have children, how does it affect them? What do they think about you? Man, no one had ever asked. And I'm ready for it, because I social work degree. I'm ready. I need to talk to someone. When we left that first camp, if somebody had said, hey, I'll take care of this old lady, you can go and make that and find you a girlfriend, I'd have been like, man, if you don't get out of my face, this is my girlfriend for today. It was a beautiful tour. I enjoyed it. I was able to talk to someone. that understood, that really was seemed to be interested in what really goes on in prison. And at the end of the day, she got ready to leave, she asked me. She said, "Carl, what do you want to do when you get out of here?" I said, "Well, Dr. Campbell, I would love to go to college." I said, "But I just went up for parole 4 months ago. They gave me a year set off, which means they'll see me next year, which is really their way of telling you you're not going to go nowhere no time soon." I said, "So I'll probably be here for a while." And she said, sweet as she could be, she said, "Oh, I can get you in college." I was like, "Sweet. Thank you, ma'am." And the tour left. And, for a couple of days, I had a warm memory and feeling about
Mhm.
it. But then life goes on. 2 weeks later, after the tour, I got two letters. I got one letter from the parole board. Now, they told me they weren't going to see me for a year, but I got a letter from the parole board after 4 months saying that they were going to call me back up for parole consideration at their next monthly meeting, 5, 6 months early. The second letter was from a small college in Holly Springs, Mississippi. And inside the envelope, there was only an application for admissions to Russ College. So I went to the director of our tour. I remembered the old lady then, Dr. Campbell. And I went to our director and said, "Miss McBride, you remember that old lady that came up here with that tour?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "This lady done sent me an application for college, right?" And Miss McBride said, "Fill it out. Send it in." Man, I'm not going to send no letter out and have those people up there at this college calling all the professors, hey, and laughing. Like some inmate wrote us a letter saying they want to, send us an application. They want to go to college. And I held that letter probably for about a week. And finally I decided, you know what? I want to say it at least once. I want it on my record at least once in my life that I applied for college. If they laugh, I'm not going to see them. I'm not going to hear the laughter. Let them have their fun. I sent the letter in, and a week later, I got a response. They told me I needed $25 or $35 for a key deposit for their fall semester, which was 2 months away. Here's what happened, Rick. When Dr. Campbell said, "I can get you in college," she meant it. There are people in this world, and you can't recognize them when you just see them on sight, but they have a certain power, and it's not, spiritual power. And Dr. Campbell had lived her life in such a way. She got home, she called the governor and said, "There's an inmate in Parchment. His name is Karl Wansley, and I need him in school in September." You know where I was in September? Russ College.
That is just freaking amazing.
Yeah.
The woman that you didn't want to deal with became the most beautiful one on the bus. That's what the God I know does.
The stone that the builders rejected.
Yep. People that cross our paths that we don't know are actually angels. So the last paragraph, or getting to the last paragraph of your book, it says, on June 20, 1986, 11 years, 6 months after being incarcerated, I was a free man. I really would encourage folks you can grab an electronic copy of this book. If you want a hard copy of this book, you can send me an email on my, I'll get Danny to put that up in just a second. But Karl, I just am reminded of the promises in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the two that come to mind for me are, we'll no longer regret the past. It's not that we don't have regret for what we did, but we don't live in regret of the past. We don't go back there in morbid reflection. And that we'll see, no matter how far down the scale we've gone, how our experience can benefit other people. And you are a living example of that today. And I thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, your love in writing this book, and for surrendering and allowing the experiences of your life to shape you into the man that you have become. the gift that you are to me and to the world. And I want to thank you for being here with me today.
Well, it's my pleasure being here, but to God be all glory.
Mm.
I'm just a vessel.
Same here, my friend. If you'd like to get into find all of our recorded podcast videos, contact information, email, available coaching, etc., can be found on my website. You can go to my email there if you're interested in a hard copy of this book, and Karl and I will work out how to get you that. I'm going to put a link on this Facebook here in a few minutes that will lead you to where you can acquire an electronic copy of Karl's book, Journey to Manhood. And let's see what else. I think that's about it. You can also go to ebooks on Google Play and search for Journey into Manhood by Karl A. Wansley, Wansley. If you'd like a hard copy, you can reach out to me again by email. And my email is rickgregory@theawakencollective.org, and we'll make that happen. Thank you to Daniel Anderson and Audio Alchemy Productions once again. Until next time, my friends, love and kindness, always.